Do you need to be restored? That's the topic that we're going to address today on Flourish-Meant. I'm your host, Tina Yeager. And today I have this beautiful guest with me, Meshali Mitchell. And she is a portrait artist, a creative image builder, and a storyteller. And she's here to share from her heart and her experience and her testimony and all of the research that she's done, a beautiful story analogy and a wonderful process by which you can be restored. Make sure you listen to this entire broadcast so you can get all of the tools that you need to rebuild where you feel like your life might be crumbling. Welcome, Meshali. I am so delighted to have you on Flourish-Meant today.
Thank you so much. I'm honored to be on, Tina. I love your ministry and your heart. We had such a good conversation even before we hit record. And I love and honor all that you're doing, and just so honored to be here.
Meshali, I want you to pick apart something you said in the first part of our conversation about desperation being a threshold that led you to a wonderful renovation that you hadn't even imagined. So can you talk about how you were able to reframe desperation as a gift?
Yeah, so that time of my life was really tough, Tina. Like I said, I had experienced some pretty deep traumas that what I say is they eroded the foundation of my life. And so I became very unstable mentally, emotionally, during that time of my later developmental years as a kid and into my teen years. I thought Bible college might fix me later. So I tried that and it didn't fix me. So I got to my mid-20s, like I said, just emotionally, I just really struggled. I dealt with pretty severe on and off depression and anxiety. I felt very limited in my living. And like I said, I wasn't experiencing what the word promised me, the John 10:10 abundant life that Jesus came to give me. So that was a very hard time in my life. But what that did was the desperation and the pain actually drove me to true healing and to get help. That led me, I came to a place by mid-20s where I couldn't manage the pain anymore. Before I was coping and surviving, and I dealt with pretty extreme perfectionism, and I did those things. I didn't know I was doing those things, but I did those things to survive. I had learned those ways of thinking and acting. And so even like I said, being a believer and being even in ministry, I was kind of struggling in a glass house, I felt like, and doing what I needed to do to survive. And just came to a really tough place, like I said, emotionally, where I knew something had to change. And it was such a hard time in my life, but now I see it as a mercy. I see it as the Lord allowing me to get to the place that was so desperate that I truly was ready for the healing He had promised me. And I began to actually, like I said, apply the word instead of just hearing about it and knowing about it. I began to walk the word out and listen. And, James tells us, James 5, to confess our sins to the Lord, for instance, and then confess our faults one to another so that we may be healed. So I began to do that and apply that, the James 5 principle to my life. And the word works, and I began to experience, true healing.
What are some of the specific tools and practices that you recommend for people as they're starting to seek restoration and healing in their lives?
So one that we've obviously talked about a lot here, and I talk about in the book, is surround yourself. Use wisdom, of course, pray through this, but surround yourself. You don't have to have a ton, but with a few kingdom people. So, kingdom people that I walked with played such a pivotal part in my healing and still do. So I love that you called it, my team, your team. So everybody has a team. So pray through that. Chapter 8 of the book, I talk about the load-bearing beams of soul care. And so this gets really, really practical. So I talk a lot in the book about even practically taking care of myself and living a restored life, the whole being, not just spiritually, but physically and emotionally. I was seeing a counselor that was taking care of nourishing, my emotional state and healing and talking through things with a professional, like you said, someone that's seasoned and professional. I'll get as practical as this, and this still plays a part in living a restored life for me. But I was overworked. I had no boundaries. I was getting no rest during that season of my life. I wasn't nourishing my body well. I wasn't stewarding my temple well. So even down to the practical stuff, Tina, I began to, exercise regularly, drink lots of water, take my vitamins, sleep 8 to 10 hours a night. Even in the book, we get really practical too. There's a lot of story and spiritual and biblical principles, and then also some practical stuff and handlebars people can take away of living whole.
This sounds like a full-time job, Meshali. Let's talk to that person who's saying, I don't have time for all that.
Well, to the person that's saying that, I've been there, but this stuff, for me, these principles, I got to a place where they weren't optional. And so I got to a place where I really wanted freedom. I really wanted healing. I really wanted to live a healed life. And we make time in our lives for what matters. Everyone I sit down with in 2025 is, in quotes, busy. Life is full. We live in a fast-paced culture. So I've learned in my life, because I've had seasons too, where I heard a podcast or I read a book. Okay, well, that's great for them, but I don't have time for that. That sounds great, but not in my world. I came to a place where I knew that I was the gatekeeper of my soul. I was the gatekeeper of my life. I was responsible for my life and my health and my story. I couldn't blame things on other people. The state of my soul, I could not blame on others. I was the gatekeeper and I was responsible for that. I really believe we all are busy, but we all make time for what we really, really value. And, my story is not the exact blueprint for healing, but I'm asking people, to pray through in their own way and seek the Lord about, their journey and their story of being restored and what it looks like to live whole and healed.
Can you talk about patience and perseverance and self-forgiveness a little bit?
Sure. Yeah, those three words really embody a lot of the message of restored. Those are, all those words are talked a lot about in the New Testament, and those, the faithfulness and endurance, those words, we really don't like those words. We really don't like to talk about them much, but that's what the Christian walk in life is made of. That's the substance of our lives. And so the story physically, I purchased the home in 2018, and here we sit 2025, and it's been a very long, slow work in progress. And like I said, it very much parallels some of the journey of my own heart and soul. And there's been a lot of, like you said, patience and grit and a lot of self-forgiveness, Tina. My story held, like I said, some hard things that I didn't realize I was doing this, but I just had not forgiven myself. I had forgiveness from others, and, I was walking that journey out, but it was almost like a narrative in my head where I just dealt with so much shame. And so the Lord freeing me from those things in my life and those narratives was such a key to my healing.
Meshali, during this process of renovating this beautiful yet difficult farmhouse, what part of this restoration journey really resonated the most with the restoration journey of your soul?
I would say the process of it. Like I said, I wanted so desperately to have that HGTV moment, but the process of it is what has revealed so much about myself and about the Lord. And it's transformed me. It's changed me. I'm a different person here. I sit 2025. I'm a totally different person than I was in 2018. And if the Lord had answered my prayer and done everything overnight, it wouldn't have formed me into the person that I am now. Not just for myself and my own healing, but now this book that will go out in the world and do, I call it in Ephesians 3:20. It's way above what I could have even imagined or hoped or even prayed for at the time. That message has resonated the most with me. What we did in the physical home has been part of my journey, spiritually.
Meshali, what is one final message of hope that you have for those who are facing a place of desperation, devastation, overwhelm, grief, loss, woundedness, wherever they are, that looks unsalvageable? Can you talk to that person and offer them one final message of hope?
Sure. Yeah, I remember, Tina, being raised in ministry and then doing what I do. I specialize in photographing authors, speakers, ministers. That's my world. And carrying some of this brokenness I talk about and being in deep emotional pain and anguish in a season of my life. I remember sitting and listening. I would sit in big conferences, church services. I would listen to podcasts, and I would hear people talk about this hope and this restoration and healing promised to us as believers. And I remember that the narrative I heard in my head privately was, God can do this for everyone but me. That shame narrative told me and lied to me and, whispered that I was just a little bit different. My story was a little bit too hard. The grief was too much. The pain was too heavy, too much. And things began to shift for me when I began to receive the promise that restoration was not just possible, but it's a promise to those who believe. It's a promise through Christ. And it was possible, not just for everyone else, but it was possible for me. And so to the person listening right now that is hearing me talk and thinking, oh, well, that's beautiful and great, but my story is a little bit different. The grief is just too much. It's too heavy. My hope is that they would, by the Spirit, hear that restoration is possible for them and as a promise for them. And that, like I say in the subtitle of the book, that, as we partner with God, that's a key too, as we partner with God, that He'll restore all of those rooms of their hearts.
This has been such a beautiful conversation, and I appreciate you sharing from those vulnerable places of restoration in your life to bring hope to others. How can people connect with you as a photographer, as an author, as a speaker, and all of the wonderful things that you have to offer?
Oh, thank you so much, Tina. So they can connect online. So the website is meshali.co. It's spelled, I always have to spell my first name for people. So it's meshali.co. And all online platforms, Instagram, Facebook, all of those, Twitter, X, it's Meshali, at Meshali. So at Meshali.
I hope that all of you listening have hope to be restored in your own lives. And of course, I also hope that you will come back for the next episode of Flourish-Meant.